Hello everyone, this is AndresRestart, and this time we are talking about how Hyrule Warriors Age of Imprisonment could be teasing the Legend of Zelda Ocarina of Time remake. So if you've been following me for a while, you've likely heard me make the argument more than once before that I think Nintendo is going to be remaking Ocarina of Time in a big way to come out early on in the Switch 2's life cycle. I think we will be getting this remake, if not next year for Zelda's 40th anniversary, in 2027 to follow up the hype of the live-action Zelda movie. And there's a variety of reasons why I think this is very likely. We have a couple different interviews where Eiji Aonuma, the Zelda producer, has teased Ocarina of Time remake, and he has a history of teasing future Zelda games. We've talked about that before. There is the Zelda Lego set that has the Deku Tree from Ocarina of Time, and we've talked about how Nintendo merchandising can hint at things to come in the future. And it just makes sense for Nintendo to put out an ambitious remake, because they're probably years away before the next brand new Zelda game, so they need something to tide things over until then. If you want a more substantial explanation as to why I think an Ocarina of Time remake is happening, I'll put something in the iCard where I've talked about it before. The main point here is that myself and many others think that an Ocarina of Time remake is happening, and so with this in mind, this assumption in mind, I now look at Hyrule Warriors Age of Imprisonment, and with the latest trailer, my mind has been turning a bit more in terms of theorizing on what this game is going to entail. And I actually think there's a very solid chance that Age of Imprisonment could be setting things up for the next big major Zelda release, which I do think would be Ocarina of Time Remake. And what's interesting about this is that I actually remember years ago, I was making this argument with Hyrule Warriors Age of Calamity, how there could be elements in Age of Calamity that would be teasing the next big Zelda game. And now in hindsight, that is actually the case. And so I now want to take a closer look at this and consider what Age of Imprisonment could be teasing and or setting up for an ambitious Ocarina of Time remake a year or two from now. But before doing so, let me tell you about this sleep mask from Manta Sleep, the sponsor for today's video. If you find yourself in need of a little bit of extra rest or an afternoon nap, then this sleep mask might be a great fit for you. When I tried it out, I was actually surprised at how soft and comfortable it is, and when you put it upon your face, it does its job. It blocks out all light, and it puts you in a position to sleep quite easily, undisturbed. And I also found that the back strap was highly adjustable and not abrasive in any way. It was all very comfortable and soft to put on. So if you're looking to improve your sleep, check out the Manta Sleep mask in the link in the description below with my code SLEEPRESTART. So something else to consider here is that this remake would be more than just like an Ocarina of Time 3D upscaled to 4K. This would be something more like a visual reworking and perhaps with some significant gameplay changes and maybe even some story additions or alterations. Now, while that may seem like a bit much to some, consider this for a moment. We have recently heard, this is a rumor, that about a year and a half ago, maybe almost 2 years by this point, supposedly they had to do a visual reworking, a shift in the overall design for this remake, which to me suggests that they are going with something a bit more ambitious here. And it does also have me further think that this is going to be the thing that brings in the Zelda fanbase early on, a significant part to the Zelda fanbase, and it's going to be the Zelda we enjoy until years later when they're ready to put out a full-on new Zelda game made ground up for Nintendo Switch 2. That's going to take a long time, the next totally brand new Zelda game. So they may be going for something fairly ambitious here with this both theorized and rumored remake. And so if that's the case, I could definitely see a scenario where something like Hyrule Warriors Age of Imprisonment could be teasing the future. I mean, we've seen other Zelda games tease future Zelda games, so maybe it's not too crazy here. And actually, Age of Calamity, the prior Hyrule Warriors game, did make teases for Tears of the Kingdom. And I remember years ago talking about this, and there were certainly a great many people who disagreed, but now in hindsight, it is very evident that that is absolutely what happened. So in Age of Calamity, there were a variety of characters you could play as, and there were different cutscenes that pertained to them. For example, we had Riju, Yunobo, and Sidon, who are the sages in Tears of the Kingdom, and they were essentially the successors to the champions in Breath of the Wild. So we had already been theorizing way back then that they would likely play a more significant role in the follow-up to Breath of the Wild, Tears of the Kingdom. But we actually got to see Riju in a combat role, which wasn't necessarily expected. We got to see Yunobo gain more confidence and courage, something he struggled with in Breath of the Wild, suggesting that he is transitioning to being more of a warrior, which he was in Tears of the Kingdom. and then Sidon taking on the responsibility of using the trident. And so these were subtle hints towards the character development of these characters between the events of Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom. But there are some more substantial, obvious teases in Age of Calamity for Tears of the Kingdom, such as Purah in her prime. So Purah in Breath of the Wild is technically an old woman, however, in an experiment gone wrong, she looks more like a child. But in Age of Calamity, since we can go back to her heyday, her prime years, we see her in her adult form with still most of her youth. And it's essentially this design that is used for Purah in Tears of the Kingdom, where she figures out how to turn herself into an adult, and not an old adult as she actually is, but an adult in like their 20s or so. And so Age of Calamity teased Purah's design in Tears of the Kingdom. But there's an even bigger tease in Age of Calamity for Tears of the Kingdom, and it comes in the Age of Calamity DLC, Guardian of Remembrance. Let me just play you this cutscene here.
Now go and say thank you. Master Revali saved your life after all.
Okay. Master Revali, thank you so much for saving me.
You know, you're pretty good for a little kid.
You mean it? Thank you! I'm doing all kinds of training so that I can be just like you! Someday, I'll even master the Great Eagle Bow!
You were nearly killed by those monsters, you know. Yet you're so happy. Maybe it won't be long until you're Master of the Wind, just like me. You never know, eh?
That is true. But before that, he must surpass his old man.
It's only a matter of time.
And so as you see in this cutscene here, Tulin was just saved by Revali and Teba back in the past. And here Tulin is still a fledgling, not quite a warrior or set up to become the Sage of the Wind. However, he does talk about how he's training to be a warrior, and they all talk about how Tulin could surpass his father and how he could use the Great Eagle Bow and become Master of the Wind, which he does eventually become. This scene is teasing Tulin replacing Teba as the main Rito you'll be working with in Tears of the Kingdom, and him becoming the Sage of the Wind. Of all these characters getting some level of a tease in Age of Calamity for how they'll change in Tears of the Kingdom, the one that is least predictable is Tulin. Riju you could probably see coming, Yunobo you could probably see coming, Sidon you could probably see coming, Purah, if you're a little lucky with your theorizing, you might have gotten right, but Tulin was the one that was a big surprise to see replace Teba. And so I think considering this, it's clear that Age of Calamity definitely teased the next big future Zelda. So could the same happen with Age of Imprisonment? Well, something to consider here is that with Age of Imprisonment, this is likely the last we'll see of the Wild Tears art style, right? So there's likely not going to be as much of a connection to whatever is next, including an Ocarina of Time remake, at least in terms of the characters that are alive. Except, maybe there's more of a connection than you might think at first. Because Tears of the Kingdom does bring back the Sages. And like Ocarina of Time, they even showcase 7 Sages in Age of Imprisonment. And they've also brought back the name of Rauru. Rauru was an important sage in Ocarina of Time, and they've brought back that character name for this new version of Rauru, the Zonai, the first king of Hyrule. And in Age of Imprisonment, we are actually going to be learning about these different sage characters. We actually recently got a face reveal for one of these sages in the most recent trailer. So we're going to be learning a lot more about these sages, and so there may be details here that could be little interesting hints towards the sages in Ocarina of Time. And so we could see some different details throughout the story of Age of Imprisonment in regards to these characters that might set up an interesting little connection to their counterparts in an Ocarina of Time remake. Now, some of you might still think this is too much of a stretch, but stick with me here. It's already well documented that the producer of the Zelda series, Eiji Aonuma, in interviews has teased future Zelda games, and oftentimes when he's teasing a future Zelda game, he laughs or acts in some sort of unorthodox way, and we find out later that this was indeed a tease for a future Zelda game. This has happened several times. Skyward Sword HD, Majora's Mask 3D, Echoes of Wisdom, Link's Awakening Remake. In that case, he actually confirmed that he actually was teasing something a few years prior. And I've mentioned that there are a couple interviews where it does seem like Aonuma is teasing the next big Zelda remake. In one case, a Game Informer interview, He was point blank asked, are they working on a modern remake for Ocarina of Time? And he laughs and says, no comment. But for the sake of this particular discussion, it's this other interview where I think he was also teasing a future Ocarina of Time remake that might be a bigger deal here. So here's a screenshot of this Nintendo Dream magazine interview from back in December of 2023. And keep in mind, this is a translation, some of the words are a little off, like for the character Rauru, they actually say Raul, but it's Rauru. And so let me read you this part from Fujibayashi. His name comes from his role. For the Zelda series, Rauru is in the position of being a guiding figure. In this work, as Princess Zelda's further growth is depicted, she is guided by the king and queen of the country's founding era in the past world. When we wondered what kind of person would be suitable for such a role, we decided to select someone by the name of Rauru. So this is Fujibayashi, the director of Tears of the Kingdom, talking about why they decided to bring back the character name of Rauru for this Zonai King. But then it's this part from Anuma which has me thinking he was teasing something. Because he then says, when I first heard that he would be called Rauru, I thought it was a very natural progression. But I wonder how many of the people currently playing Tears actually know about the character Rauru? Ellipses, LOL, laughing out loud, laughing. Like we've talked about in prior interviews, there is a correlation with Aonuma teasing a future Zelda game and laughing and it being documented in these different interviews. And so diving deeper into what Aonuma is saying here, he's not sure if fans really know too much about Rauru from Ocarina of Time. Now, to be clear, he's saying the character, right? Not the town from Zelda 2. The character, which is from Ocarina of Time. And so he's saying there's a lack of knowledge and awareness of this character with the current audience. Perhaps implying that there is a need to go back to this game so people can come to know the original character of Rauru. And so then considering that Age of Calamity built up a little bit of these different characters that were going to be relevant in Tears of the Kingdom, perhaps Age of Imprisonment will be building up some of these characters that will also be somewhat relevant, or their counterparts will be relevant in Ocarina of Time. I do not think the current Rauru in Tears of the Kingdom or Age of Imprisonment is going to be in the Ocarina of Time remake. However, we may learn more about the character of Rauru throughout this story, and there could be certain elements about this character of Rauru that may translate over into this new depiction of the original character of Rauru from Ocarina of Time in this theorized remake. And so thinking more deeply on this Ocarina of Time remake, how would it be changing beyond just visuals? Could they add more content? And the first thing that comes to mind to me, if they were to add more content to this game that would be kind of easy without changing too much of the overall game structure, would be to actually provide a light temple dungeon. We're just given the light medallion for getting deeper into the Temple of Time. There is no direct trial to receive that medallion, but there is for all the others, as well as a spiritual stone. And so if they were to expand on this, this would be a perfect opportunity to provide more character and story moments for Rauru. And so there's plenty of room to show different potential connections and nods to the different versions of Rauru across these different games. Let's also remind ourselves that Tears of the Kingdom, in this past that's being told in Tears of the Kingdom, this is supposed to be the first king and queen of Hyrule. And these are also supposed to be the first sages. So they're setting a precedent here. And so when they rework these different characters in this potential remake, they can bring in some of the elements we see in Age of Imprisonment into what may be next here. And if this ends up happening, it would be a very similar situation to what happened with Age of Calamity. People weren't sure if there would be teases or not for the next Zelda game, and then after we played it, and then after we played Tears of the Kingdom, we were like, whoa, actually, there were. So maybe it'll happen again. But what do you all think? Let me know in the comments below. This is AndresRestart. Don't forget to check out that Mantis Sleep Mask with my code SLEEPRESTART with the link in the description below, and I'll see you all really soon. Take care. Bye.